weekend was what was that? Last weekend? Time flies.
Sure.
Very recently.
Yeah.
And made me think about a story that I'd heard before, and I'm sure some people have heard before, but I'm surprised that so many people haven't heard and are not familiar with. And this is a little story about Karl Malone. Karl Malone, of course, Utah Jazz forward, Hall of Fame player, really, really fantastic as a player. But there's a lot of interesting history with Karl Malone that is awfully messy, is what I will say. Pretty terrible, pretty awful, awfully awful.
Awfully awful.
So probably the worst part of this, and there are a few parts of this, probably the worst part is that in 1983, when Karl Malone was a sophomore in college and was 20 years old, he impregnated a 13-year-old girl. And the amount of people that don't know this about Karl Malone is just, it's amazing that this has not been out there more. And there's been a number of crazy situations with Karl Malone. And what's funny is if there's anything that you could maybe say, I don't know that it makes it worse, but even back then, they sentenced him to pay $125 a week in child support. And he fought it, saying that was too much money. He should not have to pay $125. He had already made over $3 million in the NBA at the time that this paternity suit had come against him, right? So I want to be clear on the timeline. He impregnated her when he was a sophomore in college. She was 13. Then the parents decided to hold off on pressing charges because he was a nice guy from the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. So eventually they end up trying to get him to pay child support. And by that point, he's already in the NBA for a couple of seasons and making money. And so to give you an idea, the Salt Lake Tribune, the newspaper in Utah, reported that when the child's grandparents initially took Malone to court for paternity, this was in 1986. It was his second year with the Utah Jazz. They requested that he pay $200 a week. Malone didn't even respond to the suit, but they did have to do a paternity test, and he was ordered to pay $125 a week plus past and future medical expenses. Malone claimed that was too much money for him to have to pay, and he later reached a confidential out-of-court settlement with the family between 1988 and 89. So he still dragged this out for 2 or 3 years before he was willing to pay out a settlement for impregnating this 13-year-old when now she's 15 and he's in the NBA for a few years at this point, and he doesn't want to pay $125. So he has a son, Demetrius Bell. All of these kids, by the way, he has 7 kids from 3 different women. Yep. All of the kids that came from not his wife, because he is married, all of those kids, he refused to have any interaction with whatsoever when they were young. He wouldn't have anything to do with them, and ended up engaging with them more when they became older. But for some people, they believe that those reasons were a little bit sketchy, and one of them is because his son, Demetrius Bell, who he refused to meet until Demetrius was, I believe, 17 years old. At that time, he told him, hey, man, it's too late for us to really have a relationship, so best of luck to you, just kind of is what it is. But guess what? Demetrius Bell ends up playing in the NFL. He makes it to the NFL. He plays for the Buffalo Bills. He has a 5-year career in the NFL. And magically, right around that time, Karl Malone decides that he wants to be a more active father in his son's life, who's now an NFL player. He has a daughter who played at his alma mater, I believe it's Louisiana Tech, for women's basketball, and then goes on to play in the WNBA. And right around that time, Karl Malone decides he is going to be an accepting father of his daughter as well. Meanwhile, lawsuits were involved and all these types of things for a lot of these situations to get Karl Malone to even acknowledge his own kids. And so it's just it's a messy situation. It's a messy story. When you think about this stuff for Karl Malone, and now he just he lives on a big ranch in Louisiana, kind of keeps to himself. And I just think because he's not in the media, you just don't hear a lot about this. And because it happened 40 years ago and, all of this stuff, you just, I think sometimes he gets a pass for some reason. But this is a guy as a sophomore in college who impregnated a 13-year-old girl. And this guy has a statue of himself outside of the arena that the Utah Jazz play in.
Yeah,
and that just it doesn't feel right.
And they knew the whole time. It's not. It's not like
yes, correct. That's absolutely right.
Not like they thought it was didn't know about it. Like they knew about this, right? They knew the whole time. Yes. They're not stupid.
Yes.
So, I can tell you Karl Malone doesn't care. He'll tell you also that he doesn't care what anyone else thinks of him. He's his own man. He's a big hunter. You see his house. He's just got full of all these trophies that he's taken
like
and
a hunting
killed.
Lodge.
That's exactly what it looks like. Lives in, Ruston, Louisiana. 22,000 people maybe live there. And he's fine. Had he not shown up to the NBA All-Star game, this story doesn't even resurface because again, we talk about timing. We talked about that earlier. It was just the timing of it all because
that's right.
40 years ago, everything's local to your local newspaper, or, something happened in Utah is not getting back to someone necessarily in, Chicago or Virginia, or
stories
Florida.
Just don't have legs the same way. Yeah.
Right. So it's only because he shows up that people start digging in a little bit more and I'm like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember the story back 20, 25 years ago. I remember it, but then it was like, well, that was we took a different mindset back then, I guess, because, I don't remember being outraged by it. I was like, well, that's weird. But then, you're just like, oh, that was in the past. And him and Demetrius are now like best friends. He's like, like Demetrius comes out. He's like, he's my best friend. Like, I don't, I essentially have forgiven him. And we're the best of buds. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I don't.
Good for him, man.
I mean, good for him,
and it's great that happened. But I will say this though, on a lighter note, if you want to find a lighter note in all of this, Karl Malone is proof of the importance of genetics. Karl Malone, a great NBA Hall of Fame player, has a son who's an NFL player and a daughter who's a WNBA player. I mean, that's pretty daggone impressive from a purely genetics perspective, separate from the fact that he didn't parent these kids or want to pay for them or be involved in their life in any way or, completely denied their existence every opportunity he ever got. But genetically speaking, he gifted them that ability to then actually be able to go on and become professional athletes, which is pretty amazing as well. Karl Malone is proof of the importance and the influence of genetics over what we're able to do athletically.
I'm convinced, though, Karl Malone was the WNBA player because they look just exactly alike.
There is a strong resemblance between Karl Malone and his daughter.
And for him to deny it, it's like...
Which isn't doing her any favors, I guess.
No, I guess not. I mean, she's a sweet girl, but I'm not sure how Karl denies it. I'm like, bro, did you look in the mirror? Like, that's you, right?
Yeah, she has longer hair. That's basically the only difference.
Exactly. Yeah, but see, my hair's short. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think that he would even be able to attempt to deny that. But in general, Karl Malone is a guy who does now and has always just, gone to the beat of his own drum. And even when those things are horribly illegal, and terribly wrong morally, ethically, and every other way. He don't care, and he will tell you that straight up. He's not worried at all about what anyone thinks about him or his past or how he handles his business. So
I guess that's the way we all should be. It's like you could do something like, I don't care. Like,
yeah.
I don't care what you think.
I'm just going to do me.
Well, you raped someone.
Yeah.
Do me. I'm going to do me, man.
That's right. That's my life.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. The Karl Malone story is one that I think, and I grew up a Karl Malone fan, I guess. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan, but I liked Karl Malone as a player. You know, I mean,
sure.
he was playing in my heyday as a child, watching the NBA, and it was Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Karl Malone and John Stockton and all of these players, Clyde Drexler, and all of these amazing players that you got a chance to see, Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson. I mean, I could go on and on naming all these players that we watched. I always thought Karl Malone was a great player, man. He was the mailman. He was the guy. But man, and then you have other weird stories that came out about him hitting on Kobe Bryant's wife. And this is while Kobe was still alive and in the arena and stuff, and just a lot of weird stuff. And then him and Kobe Bryant had words over him trying to hit on Kobe's wife. And
oh my God.
So it's just there's a lot of weird energy that swirls around Karl Malone. And he clearly brings it on himself. So what can you say? I mean, we're merely reporting what he chose to do. We're giving it to you. These are Karl Malone's actions, right? So he's gone down that road himself, and clearly does not feel any remorse, or at least won't express any if he does.
No, not at all. He does not care. Age ain't nothing but a number, he says.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Whatever works for you.
And apparently the police were like, well, okay. I guess so.
Yeah. The courts, everybody was like, all right, he made the impossible argument. There's nothing we can say to that.
He doesn't care. I don't know what to do. There's nothing we can do. He just doesn't care.
Yeah. We did not anticipate him not caring. So this is he found that trump card to play of just like, well, he doesn't care. Well, dang it. We were not prepared for this. There's no solution to that problem.
Had he cared, we would have put him in jail for statutory rape, but he doesn't care. What are you going to do? What are you?
How can we prove anything if he doesn't care?
My years of...
Is it a crime?
My years of trying cases and sitting on the courts, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what to say. Carry on. You know what? Instead of $200 a week,
no precedent for this.
I'm just going to make it $125 a week because I don't want him coming back up in here. I don't know what he'll do next.
That's right. This is a guy who just doesn't care.
He does not care.
Pretty unbelievable. No. So Karl Malone, kind of historically a bad person, but hopefully, look. Let's. I will say this. To show Karl Malone a little bit of grace, happy to have Karl Malone on the show to talk about this stuff, but I know he wouldn't talk about this.
No.
But I will say this. It does not excuse anything that he's done, but it was 40 years ago. The only thing that we can hope is that Karl Malone has evolved as a man, as a person, as a father, as a member of society in that period of time. He made horrible mistakes when he was younger. Let's just hope that he's evolved and moved past them at this point, and is a better person and a better part of society.